Hello,
Hey, Ellie.
Brian.
How are you?
We're both cold.
Cold, yes.
It's relatively cold for our little spots in the world.
I'm in South Florida, and I know people in Chicago would laugh at me being cold, but it's 55 here, and you go outside and it's gray and drizzly, and
Oh,
so out come the sweaters.
and you
And
like all the delicious things that go with sweaters, like all
yeah,
good.
I drank a tea today that was called chocolate tea, and it really, tasted like chocolate, but warm and
Oh,
watery, and yeah.
it's
So
fun to have these moments where you're like kind of break normal schedule, normal routine, and you kind of just really embellish into sort of the warm weather things.
yeah, comfort food.
Yeah.
Uh, so Haley, I had promised myself that I wasn't going to follow any news other than non-political news. I'd follow the fires in California, even though
Mhm.
I couldn't do anything about it. So that's I prayed for the people. My heart broke. I wrote about, what would I do in a situation like that. But I promised I didn't want to read anything about Trump uh, and and what he was doing. And yet I found myself reading an article that I trust usually daily, and it was all about Trump. And I found myself getting upset. And uh, I don't want to live the next 4 years upset.
I And I don't think you'll just be upset because, and I say you, but I feel exactly the same as you. I think we both had like a chat together where we're like, we're not going to get pulled into it. And I feel the same as you. It was just a very slippery slope. And all of a sudden, I'm sitting going like, oh my God, I'm so stressed that I can't like breathe. I can't even ground myself because I'm so concerned about stuff that I can't do anything about it. And so I sort of last night was like, I need a really strong boundary on myself to kind of pull out of this and just get out of it. And sort of my word here is faith, and sort of really trying to ground back into faith that even though it looks like, I don't know what the right word is, but even though it looks very difficult, usually I should have faith that it's going to be okay, that it's going in the right direction, that it is going for the benefit of all of us. And that might not be in our lifetime, but it might be in the benefit of, our legacy. And I find it very difficult that, being pulled into the media and all of the noise that goes with it, it really drains faith out of you or out of me. It's hard to have faith.
And normally, what is your source of faith? My source of faith is the goodness of other people, um, reminding myself that uh, less than 50% of the population who voted for Trump. So this great mandate that he says he has is not a mandate. He barely won the popular election. Um, and so I think, okay, that other 50%, that voted against his agenda, um, we all are going to sustain each other for the next 4 years. Uh,
And
good deed, good deeds, right?
for me, it's more centric and more about me being, I have to be the person that has faith. And I have to be the one that, before I look outside for faith, I have to be in a place of faith. So it's really me coming back to myself and being like, wait a minute, what do you actually believe in? Are you believing in that right now? Are you doing the necessary work to make sure that I'm bringing myself back into faith every single time that I'm shook up?
For me, Haley, uh, it's less about having faith because I really don't think long term. I tend to be, you know, in the moment. For me, it's loving kindness
Hmm.
uh, shown by me and by others. Uh, if I can give you an example, I was at the doctor's yesterday, and a person who was, I think he's a physician's assistant, who was doing a test on me, um, was very lean. He told me he weighed 122 pounds.
Ooh.
He was 5'4", but uh, in his life, he had weighed 485 pounds.
Wow.
485 pounds at 5'4".
Wow. That's a lot.
But he lost it all.
You got it. Yeah.
So, I spent my time asking him questions. And one was, uh, do you think of yourself as fat, or do you think of yourself as lean as you are now? And he said, well, you may laugh, but I think of myself as fat. And I
Hmm.
said, no. I said, everybody I talk to, everything I read about it, the person who's lost all the weight still thinks they're fat. The chubby kid in grade school, and then maybe the obese person later. But I took joy in asking him questions that people often don't ask and showing interest in him.
Hmm.
I learned something new, and left he left hugging me. And a hug is usually an indication that
It
something
went
good.
well.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, my father and I never hugged after a conversation. Uh, but so I did want to ask you, as a person who has gifts that the average person is not aware of in themselves or has ever practiced, your gift of clairvoyance and all the other voyances, do you have uh, any vision at all about uh, where we're going, or is it based on hope?
Mm, those are such interesting and convoluted words that are so connected to each other. With my ability to read energy, and very often people want me to read their futures. And what I know of this is that there is no person that can read the future that is perfect. They're just reading one possibility out of 50 million possibilities based on information that we have today. And if any part of that information changes, it changes the entire tangent of that possibility. So I'm not a huge believer in people being able to read the future and being able to predict the future. I think sometimes we're lucky that it does actually work out. But I think also, too, it's a very general working out. And what I have asked, and when I sit in meditation to kind of come into faith and, decide the difference between is that faith or is that hope? Because I feel like hope is more of something outside of you. You're just hoping on luck.
Mm-hmm.
And faith is more of a knowing. When I sit and I ask these questions, and really I ask the questions because that's part of my work to be like, all right, I'm really bothered about what's going on here. I don't see a solution. What am I supposed to do here? Like, how do I come back to myself and really focus on what I need to do? And when I look at this, I'm always shown that this is all synchronistic and this is all part of us collectively moving into a more loving kindness civilization. And I think, when we look at this, and it's very easy and logical for me to speak about it, it's difficult for me when I'm reading and caught up on social media and I get shook up. What I see and what I am shown when I ask these questions is that what we see outside of us is not just something that's outside of us, it's in every single one of us. it's an opportunity for every single one of us to take, when we are rattled, to take a step back and be like, where am I doing this in my life? Where am I allowing this in my life? And I think that's the point of all of this, is that we are being asked to look at the double standard that we have and remove it. Be better. Be better humans. Don't only be better to certain humans and not to other humans. So when I see sort of what Trump is doing, and, to be honest, there are a few things that I'm excited about that he talks about, or he talked about before he was president. And I was like, okay, maybe this isn't going to be all terrible. There's going to be some good spots. But, this week it has been entirely triggering because a lot of it I've seen is rights being removed from people and nobody really saying anything, no real uproar about this, or no, the other 50% of the US population saying, we're going to put a stop to this. It's just been accepted. And I think this is where we all need to sit back and be like, all right, why am I accepting this? Why am I okay with, while we're taking away rights from these people, I'm not going to really talk about it, or I'm not really going to get involved in it because it's nobody that's really close to me right now.
How could you get involved with it?
I I have to always come back to my decision to leave the US. I, I left the US.
Yeah.
I don't have any intention of returning to the US. And I am very grateful that I live in a country, it has problems, but I also live in a country where human rights are a privilege that, everybody is very much part of. And everybody's trying to help each other. I'm very grateful for this. And I also realize that in my choice to leave the US, and very unlikely that I go back into the US anytime, like within the next 10, 20 years, I don't think I'm going back. I've made the choice to no longer be a part of that society. I realize that a lot of my clients, a lot of my friends are still part of that society. But for me personally, this is something that I made a choice not to be a part of. I left.
How does that change the future?
My future or the future of the world?
Well, the things you worry about, or the things that you feel you need to react to. You've moved, but you don't want everyone in the world to follow your steps to move.
No, I think if people feel the need to move, they should move. And if they have the ability to move, they should follow their path. But, the benefit of being outside of the US is that I see that there is a very specific US narrative and a very specific US propaganda that isn't true outside of the US. So I, get to sit back, and as much as I get riled up about what's happening in the US, I get to sit back and be like, wait a minute, that's in the US, it's not here. There's things here that I can be involved in and things here that I can celebrate and be like, all right, if that's not in that country, I can be really grateful that I'm in a country where we have it, where we have freedoms, and really celebrate that and, be present with the people here. I realize that life, I do have that wonderful perspective of being outside of the US now, living in the US, being a part of all of the media, all of the propaganda, now being outside of it and being able to be like, wait a minute, that's not true. What they're saying in the US isn't true outside of the US. What they're saying in the US isn't even true in the US. So I think, part of where we're going in the future, not just my future, but as a collective community, is to always come back to, are you actually following the truth? Or are you following what other people have told you is the truth? And I think this is a wonderful opportunity, with Trump, for people to just continually seek the truth.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you to tell the truth. and I promise you I won't argue with you about it. And we'll move on. You said a minute ago that there were some things that you were excited that Trump was going to do. Can you tell me what those were?
I am optimistic, cautiously optimistic about his collaboration with RFK Jr. and especially looking at the FDA and the food and how the pharmaceutical industry literally has turned healthcare into an industry and insurance, looking at that and hopefully trying to revamp it. Um, but I don't know if he's actually going to follow through with it because I think what we've seen in the last week is that he may said it, talked a lot before, and once he's come in, he's kind of been like, "Well, that's not really going to happen." So,
Well,
you know,
he issued a lot of executive orders
mhm.
saying, no more health reports until they've been approved, no more of this, no more of that. So um, I do think he's going to act on
I hope
whatever.
he does.
Yeah.
I hope he does because, my experience, and again, always trying to be conscious of I'm no longer in the US, so I kind of need to be more present with the country that I'm in now. But when I was in the US, I very much experienced a healthcare system that only works for the rich. And not just the rich, the ultra rich, the top like 2%.
Mm-hmm.
And, I experienced my rights being taken away because I didn't have money or I didn't have that kind of money. And I was fortunate enough to actually have some money so I could make other plans. But, the vast majority of Americans don't have that kind of money.
No, they don't.
And it's incredibly scary to me that, and this comes from a place of loving humanity, that a large amount of the US population doesn't have rights, doesn't have
Even
access to healthcare, clean water, to education. These are very basic human rights. And in 2025, where, and I think one of the things that I was excited about is that Trump was actually looking at the science of how far behind the US is in the world in terms of education, in terms of health.
mm-hmm. Well, we'll see. We'll just see what happens.
We'll see. And I hope, I do have hope and I do have faith that maybe he will get the wheels going, that in 10 years' time, it'll be vastly different and more people will have access. It will be a healthier place to live.
I'm not sure. I think he cares about how other people live. I think, it's as an article this morning said, it's a lot easier to break things than it is to build them.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
you can,
maybe, that might be his legacy, is that he broke what needed to be broken so that the next sort of presidents and politicians coming in will be able to fix it and make it better.
uh-huh. Well, I'm hoping that, and we can move on, but I'm hoping that all the bad stuff that's happening will shake people up and shake people up who have influence. It used to be when I grew up, Haley, and when you were growing up, that your teachers or your parent would recommend that you write a letter to your congressperson, right? And tell them how you felt because it was believed at the time that it would make a difference.
Mm.
It doesn't make any difference whatsoever today. But
And
they're pressured to vote a certain way, and if they don't, they're promised an opponent in the next election, and they're terrified, and they know if they want any money, which is so important, so I'm hoping that people grow a spine,
I'm hoping that people take it more personally and not just, oh, I don't know anybody, or that's not my daughter, or that's not my cousin. I hope people take it personally. the other thing I wanted to mention, being in Mexico, and obviously we've had the first round of deportations, a little part of me is excited about that because these people coming back into Mexico, and I know that they're eventually going to go, be processed through Mexico, but come on back. Like, I do think that there's going to be an enormous brain drain because of these policies. Come on back. Come and make Mexico great.
Mhm.
Bring those doctors back. I don't know how many doctors are going to come back, but bring all those people back that have experience, that know how to work. Come on back and make it great here.
Yeah, those aren't the ones that are coming back, as you know. The ones that are going to be forced back are the farm workers,
Come
and
on back because in Mexico too, there's a massive initiative to, steer away from US policies around food and seeds. And so, bring all of those farmers back and let them get into the lands. And, there's an enormous investment in, people trying to start businesses and people trying to, make Mexico better. So come back. But please, we don't want the US seeds.
Haley, earlier you said that hope is hollow. I don't know if you use
Well,
that
I
word.
feel like hope is something outside of us. We're hoping somebody else will change something for us.
Right. I think the Tao Te Ching says that hope is hollow because,
Mm,
you know, hope or regret, uh, there either hasn't happened, and you're trying to create a future that doesn't exist. But faith, you just you described faith as what?
knowing. It's an
Yeah,
internal knowing. It's peace,
yeah.
internal peace.
I would use the word trust. That what I believe, I trust is true.
Hmm.
I have faith in what I believe. I trust it, and that's another renaissance that I think is happening. Um, that people who say they are of faith uh, aren't, and people who are said to not have faith do have faith. It's just
Hmm.
not religious. There's such a difference between religion and spirituality, which
Huge.
we've talked that into the ground, but it's true. Uh, I think when people read my memoir, and I insist that I'm still Catholic, but I explain that I don't believe this. I say, well, you're not a real Catholic. Catholics have to believe this. No, they don't. you know, Catholics are almost all cafeteria Catholics who pick and choose what works for them. There's nothing wrong with that. Better that than leaving uh, and feeling that you had to run away from home, um, because it was you didn't agree with everything your parents said. Uh, who does? Well, we could talk about you, Haley.
I think, you bring up religion and spirituality, which we do speak a lot of. And I think religion and hope go together because it's all in the idea that something outside of us, another human, will change and make things better. And I think, the point at which religion becomes scary is the point where you kind of need to sit back and be like, I'm now fearful. That's completely opposite to what religion should be. Then I think you should have the freedom of sitting back and asking yourself what's true.
Yeah.
And you call your truth Catholicism because, not, probably 90%, maybe 80%, let's be conservative, maybe 80% of Catholicism is true. It is fundamental truths that are exactly the same fundamental truths that are in other Christianities. It is the
If it,
same
if it's
fundamental truths that are in Islam, that are in Judaism, that are in Hindu. It's
right.
just how they're taught that where it gets. And
Yeah.
so, the perspective and the flavorings and the marinade that goes with it, that, makes it scary. So I think, again, possibly the benefit of these times that we're in is that more people will sit back and take responsibility and be like, wait a minute, these words aren't matching up. The math isn't mathing.
Yeah. Yeah. To acknowledge that you're a fundamentalist Christian and that nothing the president says matches your faith. There's no reflection of the words of Jesus at all in the
No.
policy. And that has to confront you, I would think, that, and that's why I think a lot of young people are leaving fundamentalism as a religion, because they see this total conflict between their religion and what's being said by the people they support.
And I think we're seeing a movement there.
Yeah.
I think the fact that TikTok was semi-banned and brought back on the Meta servers, I think that's proof that the young people are really starting to question what they're being told and what is convenient truth. So, when we talk about possibly hope again, well, there's hope.
Yeah.
It's incredibly difficult now to corral the younger generation and have them believe in one thing just because it was said.
I'm not sure that TikTok is back because of young people. It has an
No,
awful
it's
lot
not back because of young people. I think it was banned because of young people.
to do. I think it
Yeah.
was banned because of the fear of the influence of China on influencing young people in the United States. But again, you and I are in the dark about this.
Mm-hmm.
We know little pieces of this or that. Um, and we have a significant age difference, you and I do. And one of the things that I feel grateful for is having had the opportunity to live my life fully. For instance, there's been a directive that uh, there are no more departments of diversity, equity, and inclusion
Mm-hmm.
in any federal office. Well, that's what brought me in to speak to the NSA and to the State Department and to all of the secret labs like Sandia and Brookhaven. Uh, Without those initiatives, I would never have been brought in, and none of the people who heard me would have the opportunity to grow differently. And I'm sad that your uh, life is going to be impacted by stuff that my life, won't be impacted so much by because of my age.
Yeah.
And that if you had children, that your children are going to be impacted by things that I mean, I was impacted by negative stuff. With it's been 50 years of activism, on gay issues that have brought us uh, to where we are today. Not just my activism, but those of my contemporaries. Um, so we faced tough times, AIDS, without a president who supported it. But uh, the battles that are ahead of us are really in the hands of younger people like yourself and young
I
people
think
younger than you.
it's more in the hands of the younger, like 25 and below.
Yeah.
And I think, maybe 30, but closer to 25 and below. But I think the benefit of having people like you come before all of us and them is that the seed was planted. It allowed them to grow up in a world where trans, if you ask a 10-year-old or even a 20-year-old, what's your idea on trans? They're like, I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
Not because they don't care from a place of it's
And,
terrible. They are not going to put energy into hating something that they don't see as a problem, an issue.
right. Yeah.
And I think that's because of the work that you did. It planted the seed. And so when we see these things, this is my understanding and my knowing of where we are today. When we see these things like TikTok being banned, when we see DEI like being pulled out, I think those are sort of the last ways to try and control so that there is no freedom of thought.
Mm-hmm.
it is a way to control these, this younger generation so that they aren't just so accepting of each other. They aren't so accepting of diversity. Because if we are fully accepting of diversity, we are practicing loving kindness.
Yes.
And
There's
how
no
do
way,
we
there's
control
no way
people?
around it.
There's no way around it. So I think it's, again, make it break as much as possible so that people may sit back and be like, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense.
Uh-huh. Yeah. One contribution, I think, uh, besides telling a good story, one contribution in my book is how I learned to help people change their beliefs and behaviors. And the because a lot of people feel that you roll your sleeves up and you walk in and you argue with them.
Mm-hmm.
That's not how you do it.
No.
Arguing achieves nothing, nothing, because arguing entails making a person feel defensive. And as soon as a person feels defensive, you've lost them.
Yeah.
So to change people's personal beliefs and behaviors, they have to feel safe, respected, and they have to hear a story that they've not heard before that puts a face on the issue for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I have story after story of how these fundamentalist Christians, would say, God had you sit next to me. I'm not going to think about gay issues in the same way again. But it was only because I sat, told them my story, but not in an accusatory, blaming way. It's just, this is what my life has been like.
And I
And
think I very much agree with that. And I think it's important that we allow time because just if you try and change somebody's point of view in one conversation, you're then putting them on the defensive. They need to take that home and they need to sit with it and think about it and see it in their life before they're like, wait a minute, I'm going to be on this possibly change. And I think it is one of the greatest gifts and tools that we have is that we do have this knack for communicating.
mm-hmm.
We do have this knack for people coming to us and saying these really harsh things, and we're like, oh, I know what this is. Let's have a conversation.
Well, it's like me asking you and promising not to argue with you about, about the things that you looked forward to. I didn't know that. I mean, I know that you are uh, difficult to put in a box, but you were able to say what you feel without expecting an argument. I may have pushed back a little, but there was no arguing about Kennedy's plans for the health department or pharmaceuticals or anything. I don't argue about stuff I don't know.
I think, but I think that's in communication too, is that because I'm not speaking to create an argument, I don't want to argue.
Yeah.
I'm happy to, you ask for my views, I'm going to give you my views.
Yeah.
And I'm also going to make sure that my views that I give you or anybody else are informed. I've done my due diligence to make sure the words coming out of my mouth are as clean and as factual as possible as of today.
Mm-hmm.
So, when I'm very comfortable talking about the healthcare system in the US and the Food and Drug Administration situation in the US. I'm very comfortable because I've done not just a year, I've been involved and researched that for close to 8 years now. The same with foreign policy. I'm very comfortable speaking to US foreign policy because it's something that I have been interested in and researched for, my God, since I was maybe 14 years old. Since I first was like, wait a minute, that's weird.
So if I can just say that, and I admire your due diligence and your effort to express it in a way that could be heard, right? All of our all of our beliefs are impacted by whose book we read
Mm-hmm.
and what life experiences we had before we even started investigating.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Absolutely.
two people can read the same book and have totally different opinions on what was said.
Very
And
good point.
so, you look at the food and drug and the healthcare system through your eyes and your desire. I mean, you had favorite people to read about that, that,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes we pick people who support our position, not challenge
But
our position.
yeah, and I think part of that, because I think it's a very important fact, we can read material. That doesn't take away the responsibility on us to discern and to come back to those fundamental truths.
Uh-huh.
Because I'm well aware that I can read, you can read, we can all read and follow our favorite influences. We still have the responsibility to take that information and sit with it and be like, wait a minute, is this true? Or is this a contradiction to my beliefs? So, when I come back to all of this information that we're talking about today and making sure that I'm not being biased, I always read it, I always take it back, and I'm always like, all right, where is my truth in this? Where is what I have faith in? Where is my learning in this? And I think, I do kind of pull back from reading a lot of material now because it does influence. I can read a book like The Alchemist. I promise you I will be influenced by that book. But again, I believe it is my responsibility and responsibility of all of us to take a step back and be like, all right, great book. I like the message. Where is my truth?
Mm-hmm.
I have to make sure that I'm not the contradiction here. Like, oh, yesterday I had this belief. Today I have a different belief. Why?
Yes. And, I can get smug uh, in the fact that I feel like as if I'm living uh, my faith.
Mm-hmm.
But then a sentence pops into your head that says, love those who persecute you. Oh, wait a second. I wasn't thinking
What does this mean?
that. I don't know who said that. That's right. What does it mean? And that's really one of the hardest things for any person of faith, uh, particularly faith that involves that admonition to love those who persecute you. That's one of the toughest things to deal with.
It is, but you've been on this path. I've been on this path.
Yeah.
That what you said is honestly the key to healing.
It doesn't say agree with those who
It doesn't
persecute.
say agree. It doesn't say forget. It doesn't say pretend it never happened.
Right.
It doesn't say go back for more.
Right. It just says love. And love for me and you and is the issue. Loving ourselves, loving others, um, doing for you what I would do for myself is love. So when I think about that sentence, I think what I'm doing is loving the divine spark that's in that person.
I agree with that. 100%. I agree with that. It is me seeking the truth. Here is a person that's wrapped up in some crazy stuff, some crazy wrapping paper.
Mhm.
But it's my lust for life that I want to find the divine in that and love that divine because that is me. It doesn't mean that I have to be around that person all the time and now I have to agree with them. It just means that I recognize the divine. You may go on your way and I'll go on my way.
Right, because they may have behaviors and opinions that vex your divine.
Mm-hmm. And vice
Uh,
versa. You have behaviors and opinions that vex their divine
mhm.
or make it harder for them to be divine and harder for us to be divine.
Yes, and those are two different things. Uh, Harder for us to be in touch with our divinity, when we're filled with judgment.
Mm-hmm. And when we're
Harder.
just triggered,
Hmm.
we're not, to be honest, when we're triggered, we are not in our divine. We're in the ego, we're ready for a fight, we're ready to find an excuse and blame and shame. There's no love. And I do believe that our path, just what you said, love is the issue here. That's why we're here, is to have a look at all of the conditions we have around love, where, all right, Brian, I love you because you and I get on.
Right.
I'm not going to love another guy because he's gay.
Right.
That's where we have to sit back and be like, all right, where am I putting these conditions in love?
Uh-huh. And but going full circle, if I can, we started off talking about uh, wanting to make a difference when we're confronted with all these things that we feel are not good in terms of how people are being treated. Transgender people being sort of the issue of the day, but you know, there, it's been about Italians, it's been about Jews, it's
I
been
mean,
about
it's, yeah,
throughout history. It's
it's
always
anybody that isn't a, like,
is different.
yeah.
That is different. It scares us because we don't know the story. But so you and I can get involved with uh, activities that challenge the behaviors of people whose behaviors we feel are the antithesis of our beliefs and our sense of love, right? Uh, but that doesn't mean that the person itself uh, is something we want to destroy. Now, I know if there are people listening to this, they're saying, oh, please, I want Trump destroyed. Well, it's inconsistent with, I, I do too, but it's inconsistent with my beliefs. And
Mm.
I need to own that. His behaviors, his policies, who he surrounds himself with, all of that, I am in abhorrence. Uh, but that doesn't mean that the person does not have a soul uh, and shares the same spark that I do, even if he or she is not in touch with it.
Two things.
Yeah.
I think we're very blessed for two reasons. The first reason is to understand the mirror. And using Trump because he is what is triggering both of us, and I'm sure many other people, but using Trump, it is solely one choice for me not to be like Trump. It's just the choice I make every day. I can be just like Trump and possibly even worse than Trump if I wanted to. So when I look at Trump, I'm incredibly grateful that I can see that. Like, this is just a choice, and I can bring love into myself and be like, God, I love myself that I make this choice every day to be better. And not just better than him, but just to be a better version of love. I make that
Mm-hmm.
choice every day. But I also look at him too, and I have the wonderful blessing of having a father that was very much like Trump, and having the lesson of Trump, of my father, to teach me love.
Mm-hmm.
Love the soul, love the person, have compassion for how that person arrived to what's in front of you. Have compassion for the fact that my energy makes it harder for that person to be divine, just like their energy makes it harder for me to be divine. Have compassion for that and send them home with love. Think love. May they be in a place of love. May they have peace. May they feel the love that I feel.
Yeah. It takes an awakening. Uh, and the challenge often is that the ego uh, takes over.
And
You know,
this is why we have to be so careful about the information that we're taking in, the books that we're reading, the influences that we're listening to,
mm-hmm.
because that will bias the ego. And people will tell you it's healing is not loving the other person.
But
You're
the
like,
ego,
it's weak if you love another person who hurt you.
I think a huge difference, and I don't think you disagree with this, is acknowledging that we have an ego and that the ego at times in our life has been very useful to us. It's enabled us to do things we might not have done. But if the ego starts to pull us in the direction of uh, we're number one and nobody better try to be number one. I'm the most important person in the room. I'm the most important person in the world. I'm the most important person in whatever. And, and that changes your perspective of life and love and
Mm-hmm.
kindness, judgment. Uh, and one of the gifts in my life, and I had to learn it early, was that, um, initially I was wrapped up in this whole civil rights movement, thinking that I was stepping into, sacred space that I deserved because I had made such sacrifices. And what really, really helped me was accepting that I'm one of many. That
Mm-hmm.
I have done good work, but I'm not the only one. And if I don't make it into, if I'm forgotten after my death, the day after, that doesn't matter. What matters is how did you live your life and what are you leaving behind?
Yeah, and I think it's a choice between how you live again. I think, again, we both have the benefit of having lived lives where we've had those life changing moments or those decision points where it's like, are you going to choose love or are you going to choose fear? And I think
Mm-hmm.
we do need the ego. I 100% agree with you because the ego is the driving forces, the doing, and
Mm-hmm.
we need it. We also get to look at that some people, a vast majority of people, make decisions to allow their ego to be guided by fear. They call it love. It is a form of love because it's on the same spectrum. It's just a more destructive, it's a conditional love. And when I look at
Yeah.
Trump, you know, the man obviously loves his family. Most of the things that he does is from a place of fear. He has to do this to protect himself and his family because he thinks people are awful.
Right. But I would say there could be debate upon the degree to which he loves his family when he was having sex with a hooker while his wife was pregnant. I mean, I mean, what?
But again, what is the degree of love here?
Yeah.
Love is on a spectrum of love and fear. If we look at Trump, this is a man that I can very easily say this is a man that is driven by fear.
Oh, I totally agree.
And
100%.
that's ultimately we're all altruistic and we all want to keep ourselves safe, but we also want to keep those we love safe.
Mm-hmm.
So his children, I think, he loves his children. He will do anything to keep his children safe. His definition of what that means is driven by fear. I have to remove
And by
any threat.
and by a criteria that you and I would probably not use
I
for
I
what.
wouldn't. I can very clearly say I wouldn't
Yeah.
because I've had that journey of fear and love, and I'm very conscious with, all right, that's not the way I want to live. That's not the love that I believe in.
In some ways, you were talking about how uh, this period of time is what's going to shape the future. And you do, one can imagine that God or the universe says, all right, let's see how you deal with this one.
Let's see how you do with love here.
Let's see how you deal with this one. You make a lot of statements about love. Let's see what you do with this one. Because people, uh, as you know, in your own life, can make it impossible impossible to love in the way you'd like to love.
Mm-hmm.
You can say, I love my dad, but you hate his behavior. And I love these discussions because they help clarify thinking, right?
And I think they help too with what can we do? And sort of
Mm-hmm.
like as we started this conversation, I was sitting going like, what do I do here? Like with this bigger picture, like what I see all these problems, I can't solve them. So why do I see the problems? And I think, what is the form of activism? My form of activism is bring me more conversations where I can speak of love, where I can learn of love.
Yes, and bring me more life experiences and that enable me to grow.
Yeah, just more love. Show
Yeah,
me where I have the contradiction. Show me where I have the condition on love so that I can get out of that and get straight and narrow love.
help me keep climbing this mountain of awareness. Because before uh, I close my eyes for the last time, I would love to know that if I'm not uh, ultimately there, I did my best to be as aware as I could be and to be as loving as I could be.
Speaking of books, there was this one book I read, and I decided, like, I was like, I don't know if I agree with that, but I do use it often in terms of sort of a perspective. And in that book, it said that the soul, when the person dies, the soul goes in and basically looks at life as a movie and gets to be like, all right, that's where I messed up. That's where I want to go back in now and start again with from that.
Yeah,
And I always read that and I was like, I don't know if I agree with it, but I do like the sort of analogy of it, which is, when you pass away, don't let that be the moment that you decide to do things better and different.
yeah,
Do it while you're breathing, do it while you're living.
right.
And I think that's the benefit of every sunrise and sunset.
Yeah.
Every
It,
sunset is a death for you to say, how did I do today?
well, and
Better tomorrow.
the five regrets that are chronicled that people have on their deathbed is generally for men. I wish I hadn't worked so hard.
Mm.
I wish I had spent more time with family and friends. But make those wishes come true now while you
Now.
can. Stop. I think I told you Gregory Maguire, who wrote Wicked, uh, really likes my book. And I met him years ago, and he's come to the point in his life where he's not going to do any more interviews.
Mm-hmm.
Did I tell you that before? He
I think we
said,
were talking about it like one or two conversations back.
yeah, like, what does it mean to say, I've done as much as I'm going to do. Now I want to live. I want to live free of an agent and a phone call that says they want you on this show. They want you on this show. You want you, and you need to do it. You need to do it. You need to do it. To say, time out, bye bye. I'm not going to do it anymore.
Yeah. And I think, full circle coming back to how we started this, Trump is not a good enough excuse to not live today.
No, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And that's why, I like this conversation using him as an example, but we haven't been throwing red meat through this conversation to those who, just can't stand the man. We've tried to look at it at a different perspective, right? Uh, which I'm glad about. But when people come to the house for dinner, I said, we're not talking about him today. We're not. I worked on the meal. We're not going to ruin it by talking about a person that none of us likes and none of us can do anything about.
Yeah.
Right? So please enjoy what I worked on uh, because it's going to taste really good.
And again, I think that's one of the beauty of my life is that, I left the US. I live in a country now where the present moment is so sacred. And eating is sacred. Don't rush. Take your time. Eat slowly. The meal times, like, I have not had one political conversation with the local Mexican, apart from sometimes I will have them with my dude where we see how the president of Mexico, because she's a woman and she's standing up to Trump, kind of see how that's going. And I'm like, I'm really impressed with her. He's like, yeah, yeah, me too, but other things not. That's the end. That's the end of the conversation. And I'm very, like, it's just a different perspective to be outside of the US and to be like, oh, there is another way. And it
Yeah.
makes being in another way so much easier when you're out of it.
Yeah. The difference, if I might, is that you lived enough years here to be programmed. That
Absolutely.
the way you think, the way you see the world, the way you think about food, the way you think about work, etc. And so I was wondering, and I'd like you to keep me abreast because we'll hopefully be doing this thing for another 10 years. At what point do you,
Probably.
at what point do you feel freed of all those influences, or will you ever be? I mean, I'm jealous.
Yeah.
I'm jealous of what you describe, right, as being the high points of living in Mexico. I wish that I had that. I work towards it in my own life. And I guess we're pretty close. Ray and I are pretty close to living the life that you're describing. But I wonder if one is ever freed of the training that you've had since you were little.
I think it continues because it shows up in different ways. It shows up in different ways. So, and I know we're running out of time, so I'll try and make this quick. My conditioning and my training of the US started very soon because I was born in the US. I was a green card baby.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I was always sort of pulled aside and be like, here's the American, and she has access to all of this. And very early on, my parents would joke about, yeah, you can marry Haley and give us a bunch of money. You can get her citizenship. So it started very early on, but it started with my parents first. So the way that my path has been and my healing has been first looking at coming into a place of unconditional love with my parents. They did the best they could. This is only as far as it was meant to go, but I can still be in a place of love. I'm now seeing that from a US side in terms of, all right, this has been the narrative for so many years. I'm now have a lot of experience seeing that narrative actually isn't true. And I bring myself to a place of neutrality and a place of love, even with something that is not my truth. And immediately, the first thing that I need to do is put social media aside. Because that, as we were talking about, that makes it very difficult to be divine.
Mm. Yeah.
And then
Unless
I'm the contradiction.
unless you totally you stay focused on your own page and you keep it clean, yourself and your post. And if a person, responds in a way that's inappropriate, you block or deal with,
Yeah. And I think it's the same. You're talking about when you come into my house, you're coming
yeah,
into my world, my rules.
that's right. That's right. All right, honey. I know that we're run out of time.
We're out of time.
Yeah.
Well, I love you. Thank you so much for this time with you to talk about these things and to move towards love. Talk
Have
about
you have you put my book on your side table or
it is in my US cart to buy. I'm still grappling with how much it costs to actually send it here.
yeah, that's awful. Next time you
Um,
visit, I'll give you a copy.
so it's in my wish list of all my other books that
Yeah.
I think once I have enough books, then I'll be like, all right, that sort of makes paying the shipping cost a little bit easier to chew.
Yeah. If you're an
I'll
Amazon
be
Prime
here for
member,
like 3 or 4 months just reading.
okay.
But I hope that your book is selling enormously.
Yeah. Well, a
And
lot of people are helping me, which is great. I'm very
amazing.
I'm very grateful for that. But
Amazing.
anyway,
I hope
I
that you
love
have your
you.
moments of more and more peace, more
Yeah,
moments of peace. We'll talk soon in 2 weeks.
love those who persecute you.
Indeed. Here we go. Bye.